this edition of Dirt Talk with Drake York, and I've got the World of Outlaws announcer, Johnny Gibson. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me on the show. I'm pretty impressed with the stuff that I've seen from you so far.
Well, once again, it's good to have you. We're on location here at Silver Dollar Speedway for the 63rd Gold Cup Race of Champions, the final night here at Silver Dollar Speedway. So, Johnny, let's start off with our first question. How were you introduced to the sport of racing?
I grew up as a fan of sprint car racing in Pennsylvania. My dad was a race fan, and I just started to go with racing with him. I've been going to races as long as I can remember, basically.
How did you get started announcing for the World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Cars?
It was actually a fairly long process that I had no idea would ever happen. I never thought about being an announcer. It wasn't a career goal of mine at any point. I actually was a race fan who got to know some people involved in racing just from being around the track. Got to meet a guy named Bill Woodside who was working for the World of Outlaws and selling programs for them. So I'd go to the races and help him sell programs and get to watch the races. Showed up to help him at a race in Michigan in 1995, and he wasn't there. I did the program deal the rest of that season, all of 1996, just selling programs, and that's how I met Bobby Gerald. And Bobby was the first person that ever said, hey, have you ever thought about being an announcer with all this stuff that you know about these guys and the fact that you travel with them? And I kind of said, not really. We were at King Speedway in Hanford in September of '96. Bobby handed me the microphone and said, the first heat race is coming out, go ahead and try it. I had never called a race, never done anything like that in my life. And I must have done okay because 2 weeks later, Ted Johnson called me up into the office of the trailer and said, we're going to try something different next year. You're going to be our announcer.
Well, that's kind of crazy. The World of Outlaws schedule is scheduled like no other. They're racing pretty much every night. What is it like traveling with the World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Cars?
It's a lot of time on the road and a lot of time doing things that people who aren't on the road don't really think about. It's not just a matter of being at a racetrack, doing a race, driving to the next track, and if you have a couple of days off, well, those are down days. No, not really. Find a place to do laundry. Find some place to get the car serviced, or in my case, the motorhome. You know, doing research. A lot of the days that are really not at the track are days that I'm sitting in front of a computer screen getting information on drivers and compiling statistics. So it's really, really hectic, but it's also a lot of fun.
What do you like or dislike about the Outlaw schedule?
Actually, I've grown to like it more now that I'm in a motorhome than I did when I was staying in hotels. The part that I dislike the most, I got rid of. I got rid of the hotels. I have a motorhome now, and I have a little bit of home with me wherever I go. But I actually like the fact that we get to race so much. I'm a race fan. I'm still just a race fan, and even sometimes when we have nights off, I'll drive a couple of hours out of the way to see another race. So I like the fact that we're racing quite often.
What do you enjoy about calling races?
Just the excitement of it, just the fact that I'm getting to watch something that I love and I get to talk about it.
Have you ever done any outside announcing from beyond the World of Outlaws?
I've done, the last couple of years, I've done the USAC Silver Crown race at Syracuse at the mile. I've done some work at the Chili Bowl for the video. I've done some other races, but for the most part, it's been World of Outlaws. But I've done a few other things. I've actually done a couple of late model races when the World of Outlaws Craftsman Late Model Series first started. I did their first 5 races.
Do you watch any other forms of racing other than sprint cars?
Not really. Sprint cars, midgets, Silver Crown cars, not even so much Silver Crown cars. I'm mostly a sprint car guy. Midgets, yeah, but other than that, not really. I paid no attention to NASCAR. I couldn't tell you who last year's NASCAR champion was. I couldn't tell you who won the last race. I think Tony Stewart drives at number 14, doesn't he? But I'm not.
That's correct.
That's probably the only car number that I know.
You gotta know Larson at least.
He's the target car. I don't even know what number it is.
42.
Okay. That's how much attention I pay to NASCAR. Now, I'm an open wheel short track guy. That's what I like, and that's what I watch.
How much has changed in the sport of sprint car racing since you first started selling programs?
Oh man, so much has changed. The sport itself, I think, especially at a World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Car Series level, has become so much more professional. There's also so much more pressure put on the drivers and the teams It's it's a way that these guys make their living. So there's a lot of stress on the teams, on the drivers. Everybody depends on performance to increase their paycheck. Having said that, in some ways maybe it's not as much fun as in terms of post-race activities and hanging out. Now it's more of a get the race done, get the car serviced, and move on to the next race. But it's still the best form of racing as far as I'm concerned.
What is your favorite track as an announcer?
My favorite track as an announcer is my favorite track to watch races. That's River City Speedway in Grand Forks, North Dakota. It's a little quarter-mile bull ring, about twice as wide as this track here in Chico, and about 30 degrees of banking.
How much time do you spend home because of the hectic outlaw schedule that you travel on in and out?
That has actually changed in the past 6 months as well, because I now live full-time in my motorhome. I gave up my apartment in Minneapolis, and the reason I did that was because I was never home. I would have been home 89 nights last year between my work with the World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Car Series and then going to Australia and working with World Series Sprint Cars for 7 weeks. So I would have been home for 89 nights. I decided it wasn't worth having an apartment and paying that money to someplace I never used. So I gave up the apartment, bought a 42-foot motorhome, and that's home now. My home is parked right out back.
You mentioned going to Australia. What is sprint car racing like in Australia?
In some ways, it's kind of a throwback to what we just talked about the 20 years ago with the Outlaws, and as far as being more fun and not as much of a business. The racing is so very expensive over there that not a whole lot of people do it for a living, and so as such it's not that level of competitiveness. It's more hanging out afterwards, and everybody's friends and everybody has a good time together, and you go out and race for fun. And I really like that. I enjoy going back to that side of racing.
How many years have you been working for the World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Cars?
This is actually my 20th year as the series announcer, and I've been working for the World of Outlaws, including program sales, for 22 years.
You have quite a unique style of announcing. How did you develop that style of announcing?
I honestly don't know, because it's nothing that I've really done intentionally. Just what I do when I'm up there in the booth is just me. That's how it comes out. I listen to a lot of sports on radio, especially hockey. It's my favorite sport, and I liken sprint car racing to hockey, where it's action all the time, very fast-paced, and I think I've learned from listening to that. Was very fortunate enough to have gotten to know Mike Lang, the voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins, even before I was an announcer. I knew him back from when I lived in Pittsburgh and grew up there, and just that sort of style I think always stuck with me, and maybe not a way of being intentionally trying to deliver like that, but again, it's just what comes out. I go up there, I watch the races, and that's how it talks.
You said you grew up in Pennsylvania, correct?
Yes.
So what was it like being around the drivers of the PA Posse gang?
Yeah, it was cool. It was a great place to grow up if you're into sprint car racing. I mean, you could go to races 3, 4, sometimes 5 nights a week there, and then when the Outlaws came to town, it even took into that next level. But I loved it. I mean, I was so into sprint car racing. I never went to prom in high school, because our prom was always the weekend that the Outlaws came into town to Pennsylvania, so I skipped my junior and senior prom to go watch the Outlaws in Williams Grove.
So, I've been watching a lot of YouTube lately of your announcing, so I built up this sort of impression thing. So, you want to hear?
Go for it!
Okay, it's nothing long, it's just kind of like the first lap. Down the front stretch, and a turn number 1, stalling shots up on the cushion, bouncing on the bar. That's seriously all I got.
That's awesome, man. Way to go.
That's seriously all I got, but I do listen to your YouTube stuff a lot on the Outlaws, and I read this Speed Sport article about you in one of the former Speed Sports, and it said you wanted to be a rock star before you kind of came to this announcing thing. What steered you to announcing? Are you still in touch with the music industry?
Yeah, actually I am. A lot of my friends still play. I still play a little bit, still write songs, play guitar a little bit, and maybe someday I'll do something more with that, but definitely still very much in touch with the music industry. It's still a big part of me. I just never really thought that I would be doing this. Again, this was all pretty much completely by accident, and I'm certainly not going to complain about the way it worked out. In a lot of ways, traveling up and down the road with the World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Car Series is like being in a rock band. I mean, you're in a different city every night, you do the show, and you go on to the next one.
Who do you think is an up-and-coming driver in the World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Car Series?
Oh, wow. There are so many good young drivers out there today. I mean, David Gravel, what he's done over the last year or so, especially now in a high-profile ride like the CJB Motorsports team, I think he's going to be very much part of the future of the World of Outlaws Craftsman Sprint Car Series. It's so tough to say who's going to be an up-and-coming sprint car driver because unfortunately today, the guys that are really good early in their careers probably don't stick around sprint car racing all that long. You know, they move on to NASCAR, and I don't blame them. The money is way too good to pass up. Man, you have to wonder what it would have been like if Kyle Larson been able to put in 20 years of the World of Outlaws and what his numbers would have been like.
Do you have any pre-race or post-race rituals?
I don't know if you'd call them rituals. Not always Dutch Brothers because I can't get it all the time on the East Coast, but the coffee before I go on, that's just you know, it's something I do, and people think I'm normally just this excitable. But
So I'm sure there's a lot of great restaurants where you go for the Outlaw Tour. What is your favorite restaurant? I mean, I was just curious because I'm sure there's a lot of great restaurants out there.
There are, and I don't know that I have a favorite. One of my favorite things to do is go discover something, go try someplace I've never been before. It's more about the type of food in the different regions. You know, we just came from the Pacific Northwest. I had great sushi 3 or 4 times while I was up there. You know, you come to the West Coast, tri-tip out here. You don't get that anywhere else. So I look forward to coming to California for the tri-tip. You know, go to the Midwest, get great steaks. You know, the East Coast, lobster. You know, that stuff like that. Just try to sample whatever the region's specialty is.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of exciting races, not just World Outlaw races, but any kind of race over your career. What was the most exciting race you've ever seen?
There is no way I can answer that. There have been so many great races. I mean, you go back to the Chili Bowl that Andy Hillenberg won when there would have been, you know, probably not a single pass for the lead, but yet it would have been the most exciting race that you've ever seen. There was a different guy challenging the leader almost every lap. Great racing at the Chili Bowl. This year's Knoxville Nationals. I mean, what can you say about the show that Jason Johnson and Donnie Schatz put on? Way too many great races, and to be honest with you, it's really difficult to sit down and try to think, okay, what race was great? But you stand around talking to a bunch of race fans, and they bring up a race like, oh yeah, I remember that because this happened, and that happened. It's tough to just bring it up on instant recall, but once it does pop in your mind, you remember all these details.
If you had to give an advice to a new announcer, what would you tell them?
Be yourself, number 1, and number 2, homework. Lots and lots of homework. The preparation you do before you get to a racetrack is way more important than anything you'll do on race day. Myself, for every race that we go to, I probably spend, depending on the track and the location, anywhere between 4 and 7 hours prep time before I get to the racetrack. For a race like the Knoxville Nationals, I've got 30 or 40 hours of preparation into it.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show, Dave. Thank you, Johnny.
Thanks for having me on, man. This is a blast.
Well, recently we just got up to our 500th like on Facebook, and that was Brittany Reed from Chico. So thank you, Brittany, for being the 500th like. And today's show has been presented by Tommy Herset's Vintage Race Cars and Kevin Sherr Designs.